Hello, my name is Miko Noel. I am a graduate student at Liberty University. Today we'll be discussing 5 questions as they relate to productive and counterproductive behaviors in the workplace. This is a part of my midterm for Dr. Bryn Woods, so we will be looking at these questions from an organizational psychologist perspective. So, question 1. How have recent historical events affected the course of research in organizational psychology? We're going to be giving an example and explaining the resulting outcome. So, as organizational psychologists, we're constantly adapting to changes in our workplace. We provide insight to the business industry to proactively solve problems as they arrive in the workplace. One example that our textbook, Introduction to Organizational Psychology, mentions is the presidency of Barack Obama. Obama showed that he held the highest level positions in organizations can be achieved by anyone, regardless of their race. This has been the first time in which we've had a black male as the president of, America. And that speaks volumes from where African Americans came from at the beginning of America, slavery and the Jim Crow and just leveling certain rights up as it comes with race. One of the most recent outcomes that we've seen of Barack Obama's presidency is increased diversity. Specifically in 2020, the vice president of Barack, which was Joe Biden, was elected as the new president, and he chose a vice president of Kamala Harris, who is female and also African American. So now we have the first female African American that's vice president. Biden's choice really spoke volumes to, kind of advancing what Obama initially was doing, which was increasing that diversity, inclusion for all. One of the very first things that Biden did when he became president was creating a bill to protect Asian American individuals in America. And also, some consideration for LGBTQ identified individuals. So not only are we talking about race, but we're also including, gender and sexuality. Another way in which Obama impacted the organizational culture in the workplace was increasing government intervention in the private sector, specifically increasing the demands for accountability of equity and fairness and employee well-being. This just meant that he wanted to ensure that organizations are accountable for what they do and how they treat their employees. One of the ways in which Obama led in this movement was enacting Obamacare, which was affordable health care for people that did not have it via their job, that were not offering it, or people that just could not afford it. He was creating equality and ensuring that everyone was getting their essential needs met. In addition, Obama also had the emergency phones. Some people coined the term Obama phones, which provided free limits, certain amount for every month for people to utilize so that they could communicate, help them to assist in getting jobs and things of that nature, just trying to create a fair market. One of the most recent ways in which we've seen how these organizations have really taken on this equity and fairness is through the BLM movement, actually. Most recently, when we had a lot of job shortages due to the COVID crisis, we saw that a lot of CEOs and a lot of these Fortune 500 companies resigned, specifically recommending that their position be filled by Black employees. They recognized the lack of support or the lack of equality that was going on not only outside of the workplace but also in the workplace, and they also basically created an alliance so that we could have some more fairness in that system. So those are the two reasons in which we see that Obama has impacted the organizations and increasing diversity and increasing accountability in this private sector. Question 2, describe the socialization process for graduate students in your program. Is the program successful in socializing newcomers and creating job embeddedness? So socialization process is basically an onboarding process of integrating newcomers into the work culture. Generally, this is a 2-part process in which the organization sees if the employee is the right fit, and the employee also determines if this is their right fit, the organization. So in the context of this question, as a student, we go through these 3 phases of socialization, which is the anticipatory phase, which is where we do our research, look up the school that we want to go to, look up the values of that school to see if they align with our morals and values. Then we go through that second phase of encounter, which is when we start attending the school, getting some in-practice experience. And the last thing is that embeddedness, where you see that change. You start to ask questions. You start to get those hard skills down pat from being in the program. So what I've noticed is being an online student, the socialization process is very different. We did complete an online orientation process in which we got a little walkthrough of how the courses were going to go, and just all about what the school stands for. For me, during the anticipatory phase, I did very much align with the school because they have biblical principles that they stand on. For me, the Bible has always been a source of hope, and overcoming. So for me, going back to get my master's, for me, it kind of created a sense of support. Even though I had never even went to the school, it felt very comfortable. And actually attending the school, I noticed that they have put in some programs in the classroom that socialize the new students. So specifically, when you start a class, we do class introductions, which allow us to basically introduce ourselves to our classmates, kind of get an idea of who we're going to class with, if we have similar interests, things of that nature. Throughout the class, we also have interactive discussion posts in which we will write our own response to a prompted question, and then we read our classmates and respond to them. This creates a sense of community in which we are bouncing ideas off of each other in order to reach a higher level of understanding. Liberty also does a lot of supports outside of the classroom, which for online students is in the form of telecommunications. So I get a lot of phone calls just to check in, see how I'm doing with my course load, to assist with financial aid, paperwork, registration assistance, and I also receive mailed newsletters to the home, just letting me know what's going on in the community or what new activities are up. I also get plenty of emails letting me know about different gear that I can buy, having some LU, supportive resources specifically within the school, like the Academic Writing Center. I also have been receiving or seeing more recently commercials on my TV for Liberty University, possibly because, I'm connected with the school, but it's just creating that environment where I not only am I, verbally in that environment, but now I'm also getting visuals of the experience, the campus, some of the people that attend the school, things of that nature. I found great support in the Academic Writing Center, and the databases that are available for us to complete our papers for online students. It's very helpful, that culture, and it does create a sense of wanting to succeed, so to speak, like employee supportive environment, or specifically student sponsored. In addition to that, the staff are really good about answering questions. The teachers always respond to emails within maybe 2 days. They always provide a positive response, or they always have a biblical tag to their emails, and it just creates a sense of inclusion for me, that there's some alliance because we have common goals, or common values, so to speak. It's really pulling on that attraction piece of the selection process, with their coupling biblical principles with the school, and it just being graduate courses just being hard. It's good to have, people that can pray for you or are supportive of you and just feels like they want to see you win. For me personally, it creates that sense of fighting to overcome. As far as the job or as far as the school creating job embeddedness, I have not necessarily experienced that part of it yet. I personally work in an organization right now, and I'm going to school for industrial organizational psychology. So a lot of these courses, I have been able to apply them to what I'm doing outside of the school, in my regular everyday life, and just seeing how they impact, increase the performance that I'm having. But I have not necessarily been connected to jobs through Liberty University. I feel like personally going to school, getting that master's is a way of job embeddedness, just showing that, you want to move forward. But I would like to see a little bit more of that. And I think a part of that too is that I have not necessarily been searching for it. So that may account for why I might not have been seeing as much. So, that's my thoughts on socialization of the graduate school. Question 3, how can an organization reduce or prevent work-family conflict? So work-family conflict, as defined by Jackson Bricks in our textbook, is an inter-role conflict in which the demands of one domain are incompatible with the demands of the other domain. So generally these conflicts come in the forms of time-based constraints, strain-based constraints or conflicts, or behavior-based conflicts. So the time-based conflicts would come from limited time, whether it be at work or to take care of your personal responsibilities. Strain-based conflicts would come in the form of frustration or stress that would impact your performance. And behavior-based conflict, which are just stating that your behavior might not be suited for that environment or inappropriate for the other role. So there's hard to have some transition. Generally, we can utilize our family resources to kind of take away some of that conflict, to provide some support, whether it be relief financially or childcare, things of that nature. But on the other end, sometimes family can become responsibilities, like for instance, taking care of your children, financial demands to keep up for work, or elderly care sometimes. So some of the ways that organizations can reduce or prevent this work-family conflict is to create a family-friendly work environment. And that generally comes in the form of supervisor support and organization support. So the organizational culture matters, and we want it to align with our values and goals. Organizational support is defined as family-friendly or family-supportive organizational perspectives. We would look at these specifically as organizational benefits like healthcare benefits, salary, overtime opportunities, on-site daycare, or therapeutic sessions as needed. In addition, they can even provide elder care, volunteering. These are just the forms of support that we would see from the organization. From the supervisor standpoint, we would ask for them to be family supportive supervisor behaviors. These would help to lessen stress and therefore reduce the amount of turnover and or conflicts that they would see. Supervisor support would come in the form of flexible shifts, paid leave, team support for task completion, working for home opportunities, or performance-based bonuses / commission. One quote that I did use from the book was, supervisors that acknowledge work-family issues support employees' attempt to balance work and family, and role model creative strategies to manage work-family conflict. So if we acknowledge the problems or conflicts that the employee is dealing with, then we can apply solutions that are realistic and actually can be achieved. And we have to integrate those organizational benefits. So as a supervisor, you have to support the organizational supports that are in place so that we can show that we are aligned and that we have common goals, right? So some of the ways that we can reduce the work to family conflict is through healthcare, therapeutic services, and medication management as needed. To reduce the family to work conflict, we will provide things like drug and alcohol resources, continued education, opportunities to advance, and these are for life satisfaction overall. Okay, the goal at the end is to create a work-family enrichment program or work-family facilitation. This is basically where we would see positive spillovers from one role to another, or improved health overall. That creates a positive mentality, and therefore some embeddedness or some alignment, that continued commitment that we would want to see from our employees at an organization. Question 4. Imagine you have been asked to develop a performance assessment program for employee development. What techniques would you use to adequately evaluate employee performance as comprehensively as possible? So in this, we are to think of Murphy's List. So Murphy created a four dimensions of across job performance categories. Okay, these were task-oriented behaviors, interpersonally oriented behaviors, downtime behaviors, and destructive hazardous behaviors. So some of the examples of those are task-oriented behaviors would be job performance, task proficiency, in-role performance, and higher order and lower order cognitive skills. Just seeing, are you able to complete the tasks that are being asked of you, right? Interpersonally oriented behaviors are the tasks that are not necessarily in your job description, but they are extra role performances, right? So this is, how do you treat your coworkers outside of the job? What are your teamwork skills to support each other, that occur in that workplace, but not necessarily part of your job description. Downtime behaviors would be behaviors outside of the work that will perfect our performance. And those would be like if you're working a secondary job, if that may bring stress, or if you have problems with drug and alcohol. And lastly, the destructive and hazardous behaviors would be like safety violations, sabotage, excuse me, all of those things that we really don't want to see, like accidents that can occur at the organization. So if I was creating a plan to develop the performance of an employee, Murphy has 8 external assessment techniques that we would utilize to examine these 4 cross dimensions of job performance, right? So just to list those are paper and pencil tests, job skills tests, on-site hands-on testing, off-site hands-on testing, high-fidelity simulations, symbolic simulations, task rating, and global rating. For my specific program, to examine the in-role performance and the extra-role performance, I would focus on task-oriented behaviors and interpersonal behaviors. The task-oriented behaviors are good because they are in-role. We can see that the performance expectations are being met. And then the interpersonal behaviors would represent those extra role responsibilities. Those like hospitality, socialization skills, team building, leadership skills. Those are the things that we would need to see to show that that person can move forward, or that that person can really be a part of the culture, right? So if we combine these two performance categories with the techniques that I would utilize would be a self-assessment survey research by way of paper and pencil tests. And this is just where you give your own self-report of how you are performing, and also just what your understanding is of the job, right? We would use these tests to determine how employees perceive their performance, their role clarity, and organizational priorities, to ensure that they have a clear idea of what is expected of them, and that they personally have an alliance to what we are trying to do, or that they are on board, basically, right? I would also utilize an observational method of data collection to determine how accurate these self-reports are. And that would be through job skills tests and hands-on testing on site, right? So a lot of times we can see that we may have an idea of where we're at. This is our perceived self, but the actual self may not actually be who we might perceive ourselves to be, right? So it's important that we compare our perceptions to the reality, the actual performance, and then determine where that lapse or that gap is coming in at, so that the supervisor can create creative solutions to solving this problem, right? So based on these results from the evaluations, supervisors can review the self-surveys, the observational data, and create development plans specific to the employee's abilities, motivation, and situational factors, right? If we're looking at maintenance these employees or transitioning the employees, one of the quotes that I really liked from the organizational book was general mental ability predicts good performance in complex jobs, primarily because such jobs place higher level information processing demands on the incumbents. So, if we're looking at transitional phases or trying to move somebody up or down, we would have to see how they're doing on that job performance, right? On these complex skills. So the last and final question is, what are some possible common organizational constraints? How could they lead to counterproductive behaviors? So first, I think it's important that we define counterproductive work behaviors, and they are volatile acts that harm or are intended to harm organizations or people in organizations. And our book looks at several different models for these CBWs. There's a 2-factor model, a 5-factor model, and an 11-factor model. But for this discussion, I will be discussing 7 of these CBWs. It's important to understand that they are either organizational or individual, and we will discuss that in a little bit as well. The 7 that we discuss are withdrawals, being rude to others, wasting time, sabotage, theft, violence, drug and alcohol, or sexual harassment, right? Now, counterproductive behaviors tend to have 2 different causes. They are either person-based, that's individual, or situational based, right? The person-based are what we would coin bad apples, right? These are characteristics, consciousness that is reliable, considerate, trait anger, self-control, impulsivity, or narcissism, where we have a feeling of superiority, right? These kinds of behaviors and or traits are not good for an organization because, like they say, if you have one bad apple, it might spoil the whole bunch, right? So if we have someone that has a trait of anger, it may pass along to the next employee, in which they become volatile or angry, or that transference of energy, where that stress begins to come in, right? A lack of self-control can create impulsivity, and being in those fast-paced environments or where you're multitasking a lot, you can find yourself to become overwhelmed, right? And the narcissism is never really a good trait for anyone that's part of an organization, because we're talking about teamwork, right? It's really hard to reach a narcissistic person about kind of reaching that equality level. So those are the concerns with the person-based counterproductive behaviors. Situational-based counterproductive work behaviors are basically like during off audits where we have an opportunity. We're looking at the norms of withdrawal, alcohol use, unsafe behaviors. A lot of these can come from coworker misdirection, right? We also see situational based in the form of stress. And the book actually quotes the stressor emotion model environmental conditions. So whether that be just the environment is stressing you out, your own emotions are stressing you out, your situations that you're dealing with are creating a problem with your performance, right? It's affecting your ability to focus at work. It's affecting your ability to perform at a level that you generally would be, right? Or low level of perceived control. And lastly is injustice. And that's just reacting to injustices that you see in the organization with the supervisors, management, wherever that may come from, right? We never want to we never want to have an injustice going on, because then we can have some what they call them, freedom fighters, rebellions. You never want to create that kind of culture in your organization. So 2 common forms of CBWs in these organizations are generally withdrawal in the form of absenteeism, or abusive behaviors in organizations. And these come in 3 forms: workplace incivility, abusive supervision, or social undermining. So I'll go into each of those as well. But with withdrawal, that would be like absenteeism, where we're taking extended breaks, we're being late without permission, telling others at the organization that the employer is lousy, or that it's not a good place to work. Those kinds of withdrawal behaviors create a negative reputation for the company, and therefore could decline the performance and or the pool of applicants that a company may have, right? Abusive behavior in the organization, these would come from the culture that can create those CBWs, are the workplace incivility, which are like ignoring coworkers. People don't feel like they have a voice or that what they're saying matters. The organizational climate can be isolative or dismissive, or the behavior of targets, where people that are victims just, start to instigate different rumors or whatever it may be. That kind of environment generally is not comfortable for other people, and it can create those avoidance techniques where we might see, a withdrawal or something of that nature. Abusive behavior in an organization is abusive supervision, right? So that's when your supervisor is overly critical. They might be demeaning to you. They might try to take credit for something that you did. That just creates a negative experience for the employee. Therefore, lower levels, would not feel very trusted. All right. Last one would be social undermining, which is just social exclusion, negative rumors, feeling like you're being singled out in front of, your team. It creates a negative cloud for you, and they could push these CBWs, right? The big ones that we do see for these organizations are just poor management, abuse of others, or coworker misdirection. So we just want to make sure that we do impact these kinds of CBW behaviors, so that we don't have these organizational constraints where you might want to work in an organization, but the culture is so bad that you avoid coming into work. Those are just a few of those organizational constraints that may lead to counterproductive behaviors in the workplace. All right, so those are all of my questions and all of my answers. If you saw something that you like, please give us a like, a little thumbs up. If you have any questions or you want to continue the conversation, please comment below in the comment section. I love to hear feedback, anything of that nature. All right, it was a pleasure. Have a good day. Bye.